Ever wondered what happens to money that you might leave in the bank and just forget that you actually had that account? Does the bank get to keep all that money of yours? Is that how those CEOs are able to get $4, $5, $10 million in bonuses every single year? What actually happens to your money? Well, turns out there are different websites that you can check out depending on what jurisdiction you're from that can actually give you access to your unclaimed balances, or also known as unclaimed properties in Canada. So let's have a very quick look at what happens there. It turns out that the Bank Act actually has a specific section devoted to unclaimed balances and how to actually proceed with them. Specifically, it's Article 438, link in the description down below if you want to read the whole thing. So it's over here, but we have the summary on the Bank of Canada website right over here. It mentions very clearly that according to the Bank Act and other federal legislation, federally regulated banks and trust companies have a legal obligation to send a written notification to balance holders, that's you and I, after 2, 5, and 9 years of inactivity. Right? So you should be contacted at least 3 times by your bank in case you've forgotten about a given bank account and you're in Canada. Now, obviously, the problem is if you move addresses and you're not mentioning to anyone where you've actually moved to, the bank might contact you 20 times and they're never going to be able to get a hold of you if you, let's say you no longer use the same email, you no longer have the same cell phone, and you no longer have the same mailing address, obviously. Now, after 10 years of inactivity, the money actually gets transferred to the Bank of Canada. The good news is once the money is with the Bank of Canada, the Unclaimed Properties Office does not charge a fee for processing a claim, and they also do not charge you any fees for maintaining those sums. As a matter of fact, they will actually be paying you interest, assuming that the money that you're holding is in some form of interest-bearing savings account, and for the first 10 years of them holding on to it. So basically in the first 10 years, it's your initial bank that holds on to those sums. They may or may not charge you a fee, an inactivity fee, depending on your terms and conditions. After the 10 years pass, if you haven't claimed it, it gets transferred to the Bank of Canada. They hold on to it for 30 years if it's if the sum itself is less than $1,000, and they hold on to it for 100 years in case the sum is greater than $1,000. And during the first 10 years of those either 30 or 100 years, whichever case might be, if the money with the bank at that point in time is in the form of an interest-bearing savings account, again, they will actually pay you interest on the first during the first 10 years, and there's no fees whatsoever to do this. So how do you actually get the money out of the Bank of Canada once it's with the bank and once your sums are an unclaimed balance? Well, all you have to do is really submit a claim request, which we'll do in a second. But beforehand, let's see actually what are the things that will actually be held, right? So the items that will be held are things like checking accounts, savings accounts, so any sums that you have in there. Technically speaking, any sums that are greater than $2, anything below $2 won't be transferred, as you can see here. Properties with balances of less than $2. Other things, deposits, so positive credit card balances. So for example, if you've overpaid your credit card by more than $2 and there's still a positive balance that the credit card company owes you, again, they have the legal obligation to contact you after 2 years, 5 years, and then 9 years really, after you've no longer had your account active. And then if the money still hasn't been claimed after the 10th year, very much like with a standard checking account, the credit card company is also legally obliged to transfer those sums to the Bank of Canada. And then the Bank of Canada, their Unclaimed Properties branch, will hold on to it for, again, 30 years at least if it's less than $1,000, or up to 100 years if it's more than $1,000, those particular balances. GICs, deposit receipts, term deposits, as well as various negotiable instruments that are listed over here. Now, certain items are actually not held with the bank. So again, if you have any balances in those, it's recommended that you try to make sure that you're not forgetting about them for more than 10 years, right? So just be very careful with this over here. All right. Okay. So now how to actually claim this? Well, again, you need to submit a claim. So over here, I've entered John Smith as the random name. Obviously enter your own name. And it turns out that there's over 1,000 different unclaimed properties in the names of some John Smiths out there, right? As you can see here in this little table, you'll have the name of the individual, the city that they lived in, and as well as the province. And then they'll tell you what the amount is. Again, it's if it's less than $100, if it's between $100 and $500, as you can see over here. If it's greater than $500 or greater than $1,000, and then greater than $5,000, I believe, are the different categories. And then it'll tell you the type of property. So you can see here credit card balance, right? So that credit card balance is, again, this individual has overpaid by less than $100, but basically more than $2, and hasn't been active for at least the past 10 years, right? And it tells you, okay, it was the last four digits of that particular account were these here, and then it shows you when that transfer was made. So it was made on the 6th of December last year. Okay, so that means that this individual last used their credit card at basically sometime in 2012, basically, right? And he also mentions that it's with Capital One Bank, right? Now the reason sometimes it'll say name one and name two over here is because sometimes it's the same name of the same person transposed in two different places depending on how it's reported. But other times it might be let's say that person's company if it's a corporate account, or it might be something like over here you can see RBC Travel Insurance. My guess is they had some form of, you see here it says some form of draft that was between the $100 and $500 that basically was made out to this John Smith that living in Pickering, Ontario. So they didn't claim it, right? So all of these things get transferred. Now, what do you do if you actually want to make the claim? So let's assume that this is, it turns out, oh my God, this is me, or oh, this was my dad, for example, or let's say. Well, in that case, you would click on claim over here, right? And then if you do that, you can click on continue at the bottom. So then what happens next will depend on whether you're the living owner. So that's your actual account and you forgot about it. Now you just realize that it's over here. Or if it's part of the estate of someone, like let's say maybe a loved one has passed away and you were named the executor or liquidator or other authorized representative to deal with their estate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, whether you live in Quebec or outside of Quebec, there might be different circumstances, whether there was a will, whether there was no will, and they'll mention exactly what do you need to do in order to be able to be eligible to make that particular claim, which documents, which supporting documents you have to file, et cetera, et cetera. If it was a business or a corporation, again, same thing. How do you prove that you have some form of ownership rights in that particular business, and so on and so forth, right? So then again, you select here what the actual claim was. So let's say estate with will, you can click on next, and then you enter all the information over here, press next. And obviously I'm not going to actually fill this out since this, I'm not that particular John Smith, but you would just follow these steps and then you submit the appropriate documents and so on and so forth. And that's pretty much it.